Hey everyone, this is Sarah Barnes Humphrey here for Coupa TV, and today we are talking about margin impact. So I can't wait to share all the insights with you.
So the economy is changing. The economy is going through what I would call a structural change. So what does that mean? It means that inflation rates will consistently be quite volatile, and that organizations are going to have to cope with that. They have to move through their value chain over time. It means that the risk climate geopolitically is more complicated, which means that making decisions is a little bit more complex.
Yes.
It means that companies are having to deal with margin pressure in a way that perhaps they didn't before, which means they need to be smarter about how to manage their margin. Nobody wants to take it off the top, so you try to take it from your cost base. And that's something that every single customer, regardless of their geography or their industry, are dealing with. And we get to solve that problem.
So I heard this term, margin erosion zone.
Yes.
What does it mean?
Well, so the margin erosion zone is what we were talking about earlier. It's interest rate pressure, margin pressure, risk pressure. And when you compound those pressures, you're left with something called a margin erosion zone. It's something that eats your margin. It makes it harder to operate. It's the reality of the way that customers operate today. And we like to think that we have a nifty little way of solving for that. We call it the margin multiplier.
So that brings me to my next question, because I also have heard that term during my time here at Coupa Inspire as
Yep.
well. What does that mean exactly?
Yeah, it means that we can help customers be more productive. It means that we can help them be more efficient. It means that we can help them steer around environmental and sustainability risk. It means that we can help them act predictively. And if we can do all of those things, then we help them combat this thing called the margin erosion zone, and that makes them better.
The margin erosion zone is this concept that you have eroding margins, essentially, right? And it's
Nobody wants to hear that.
right. It's very real for so many companies right now, though, because you have historic inflation that's now coupled with historic interest rates.
Yeah.
And the inflation wasn't a one-time thing. It's something that's cycling back through the economy. And one of the interesting things about it is it's not affecting every category and sector the same.
Yeah.
But then they're also having to deal with the fact that there's so many more complexities out in the supply market, right? It's not just costs that you have to deal with, it's also
Right.
compliance, it's also sustainability. We were just talking about
So
ESG.
many things.
So there's a couple of things that are particularly helpful when you're using a tool like Coupa. But one of them is around getting visibility into spend, right?
Okay.
In 2024, you need to have something that gives you real-time visibility into spend.
Not an Excel spreadsheet?
Right, not an Excel spreadsheet. But even more importantly, like a few years ago, you used to be able to get away with like last fiscal year or last calendar year of spend. But I think most people can attest to the fact that that's just not enough anymore. You need to know something more recent, because probably sometime in the last 18 months, some of your major suppliers have changed. Like
Yep.
you need something that can give you that real-time visibility. So on the risk front, there's a few things you have to be able to do. You have to be able to understand your spend and your suppliers. That's the
Okay.
first step, right? Like you need to be very intentional about where you're going to do things like dual sourcing instead of single sourcing. But first you would need to know where you are at risk with your single source suppliers.
Yep.
So there's some investments there that are necessary, both in terms of getting that visibility and transparency into your
Yep.
spend, and then also investing in the tools to give you that kind of visibility.
Our customers' outlook for the rest of 2024 and 25 is actually really positive. There's been a lot of focus on margin improvement, cost savings, and getting a better return on your investments. So that's a lot of the work that we do, is helping companies really deploy their tech so they can get to the margin improvements and the cost savings. We're seeing a lot of that activity this year, and I think people are really happy to be beyond what has happened over the last couple of years with the supply chain shortages and all of the chaos. And we're now really focusing on the core of procurement, and procurement's really adding that value to companies.
We had a very cumbersome systems. We have many ERP, and then when we start working with Coupa, we could develop a program with one tool,
Okay.
one global process that makes things much more simpler for colleagues.
Right.
So speed, quality of data, that make a tremendous impact on the company. When you do have a tool that is simple to use, you don't try to go around, you just use it.
Yeah.
And that's allow us to control more spend, to generate better deal and so on and so forth. So that's really what Coupa has brought to us.
So the value prop I'll start with the customers, right? So that's what it's all about. So for a Coupa customer today, they log on to Coupa Pay, they see a widget.
One click.
Absolutely, right?
just
So
a
one
button.
click, that's it, right? So
Love it.
pay via Premium ACH in the Coupa Pay portal. So the benefits for them is that I'll start with money because Coupa is the margin multiplier, is what we talk about, right?
Yeah, I've heard that
And
multiple
so
times.
we had a very nice plug for us yesterday, and we talked about rebates. So the payer gets a rebate back. The fee that the supplier pays on the network, we share back with Coupa, and Coupa shares with the clients, right?
Nice.
So expand the margin, multiply the margin, right? That's number one. The second benefit is fraud and security. So we run a fraud-free network, so we're super proud about that. There's
Really
about
important.
300 data points on every transaction we
Yep.
check. And the last one is it's the supplier likes to be paid that way. So you're making your supplier happy. So money, time, fraud, security.
Customer outcomes very dear to our heart at Coupa. Tommy, what does being part of the Coupa ecosystem mean to DataMap?
Well, it's being part of the biggest transformation that the world is going to see commercially. I mean, the way that people buy things, the way that companies operate. Coupa basically encapsulates all the core functions of a business's operations and allows our customers to really see a lot of efficiencies and grow their bottom line.
There's a lot of concerns that continue to go on from a supply chain perspective, from a market disruption perspective, inflation, taxes. There's a number of different activities that continue to keep procurement up, which is different again than just having a cost savings number. So it's becoming more strategic that procurement's really thinking about how can we add value to the organization, start to really be thinking and seeing around the corner.
Yeah.
Whereas it used to just be you have a number on your head of cost savings from leadership, and that's really what the goal was of procurement.
Here it is, go do something with it.
100%. How do we make sure that we have our arms around direct in a more strategic manner, right?
Okay.
And so really what we're seeing across both indirect spend is getting these into the right technology platform. So we're starting to see e-procurement tools like the Coupas of the world that people are putting direct spend through that, right? Wanting that user experience that we're used to on the indirect side.
And why not?
Absolutely. And getting it into these platforms so that, again, we have visibility into that total spend.
What we're trying to do is unlock capital and basically become a margin multiplier for their business. So the hope is that through the efficiency and the productivity savings that we're able to drive, they drive new capital opportunities that they can redeploy for growth. And so a lot of the mindset shift that we're trying to drive is not just, hey, efficiency is great, cost savings are great, but at the same time, what can you do with that money to help your business grow? And that's really where the pivot for us is about, okay, all this spend management is fantastic. Now what do you do with it? How do you unlock it? How do you become a multiplier for your business? Maybe it's sustainability, maybe it's productivity, maybe it's resiliency in the supply chain space, and then ultimately about growth and how do you unlock that as well. And so that's a lot of what we're talking to our customers about, which is fantastic.